welcome to the Deep Dive. We've received some really interesting material from you, our listeners, focusing on the CSD Canteen purchase limits for groceries. So in this deep dive, we want to really get into why this is such a big deal and what it actually means for the defense community.
Absolutely, and you've hit on something crucial here. There's a very real pressing need to update these grocery limits at the canteen stores department. The sources you sent make it pretty clear this isn't just some minor tweak. It's described as an urgent need.
And it affects a huge number of people, doesn't it? We're talking ex-servicemen and their families, but also current serving personnel and veterans. It's not a niche issue.
Not at all. The CSD canteens, they play a vital role. They're there to provide affordable goods, essential stuff to armed forces personnel. That includes both serving members and veterans and their families. It's a key support system, really.
Okay. So let's get down to the specifics then. What are the actual limits we're talking about right now? And the key thing is these were set way back in 2008, right? That's exactly right. 2008. The current monthly limits for groceries are 5,500 rupees for other ranks or ORs. Then it's 8,000 for junior commissioned officers, JCOs, and 11,000 rupees for officers.
5, 8, and 11,000. Just hear those numbers now in 2025. Well, the first thing that jumps out is, are those figures even remotely realistic anymore? 16 years. That's a huge amount of time when you think about how much the economy changes.
That's precisely the main question, isn't it? Have these limits actually kept up with the massive economic shifts we've seen? And the information you've provided, it strongly suggests the answer is, well, no. A clear no.
Right. So our goal here is to really dig into those economic factors. What exactly has changed that makes these 2008 limits feel so, inadequate today? And just as important, what solutions are being suggested? We want to get you, our listeners, quickly up to speed, but also give you the thorough picture.
And it's not just about the numbers, it's the why. Why is this revision being pushed for? What are the real-world impacts on the people relying on these canteens? That's what we need to uncover.
Okay, so let's start with the most obvious thing. Time. 16 years. What's happened economically in that stretch that makes those 2008 numbers look like ancient history?
Well, the biggest factor by far is inflation. The material highlights this clearly. Between 2008 and March 2025, the average inflation rate was about 6.76% per year.
6.76%. Okay, maybe that doesn't sound enormous year on year, but compound that over 16 years, that really starts to pile up, doesn't it?
Oh, it absolutely does. That average works out to a cumulative increase of roughly 195.4%. So think about it this way. Something that cost, say, 100 rupees in 2008. You'd need around 295 rupees to buy the same amount of it today. That's a huge drop in purchasing power.
Wow. Nearly 200% cumulative. So if an OR had 5,500 to spend back then just to buy the same amount of stuff now, they'd need, almost triple that amount, 16,000 or so. That really puts those unchanged limits into sharp focus.
It certainly does. And the sources also bring up the Consumer Price Index, the CPI. That's another key measure. Back in 2008, the CPI was about 54.1 shay. By April 2024, it had shot up to 260.60%. That massive jump just underscores how much the cost of everyday essentials has climbed.
So it's not just a feeling like, things are pricier. The data confirms it quite dramatically. And it really is striking that the limits haven't moved at all since 2008, given this kind of inflation.
Exactly. And the lack of adjustment, it hits hardest for those with the lower limits. We're talking JCOs and ORs. Your sources point out something really important. These two groups make up something like 97% of all CSD beneficiaries.
97%. So the vast, vast majority of people who use the CSD are the ones most squeezed by these old limits. It feels fundamentally unfair.
Yeah.
What do the sources say about that, about the fairness aspect?
Well, the argument really centers on the whole point of the CSD. It's meant to be a benefit, a way to make essential goods more affordable for those who serve or have served. But with limits stuck in 2008, many are finding their CSD allowance just doesn't cover their basic monthly groceries anymore.
Which means, as the material suggests, they have to buy more outside, in the open market, where things cost significantly more. So the CSD, which is supposed to ease financial pressure, might actually be becoming less effective for many, almost like just a top-up.
That's a really critical point. These outdated limits are sort of undermining the CSD's core purpose. They're just not offering the level of financial relief they were designed to provide.
So I think we've got a clear picture of the problem. Limits totally out of sync with today's costs, mainly due to huge inflation over 16 years. And this hits the majority of beneficiaries to GCOs and ORs the hardest. So So let's pivot to solutions. What proposals are mentioned in the info you shared?
Right. The sources lay out a few key recommendations. The most direct one, obviously, is just to increase the monthly limits to reflect today's prices. They even suggest specific ranges. For ORs, maybe somewhere between 16,000 and 20,000 rupees. For JCOs, perhaps 22,000 to 25,000, and then, proportionate increases for officers too.
16 to 20,000 for ORs, 22 to 25 for JCOs. Those are substantial increases compared to now. It looks like they factored in that near 200% inflation figure we discussed.
That seems to be the intention, yes, to restore a good chunk of the purchasing power that's been lost since '08. So beneficiaries can actually cover more of their essential needs through the CSD again, like they were supposed to.
But it's not just about a one-off fix, is it? The sources also seem to stress needing a more sustainable approach for the future.
Exactly, because inflation isn't going away, right? Right. So the material strongly argues for putting in place an automatic annual revision of the limits. And the specific suggestion is to link these yearly adjustments directly to the All India Consumer Price Index, the AICPI.
Okay, an automatic annual revision based on the AICPI. Let's unpack that a bit. Why is that seen as so important? What's the advantage?
The big advantage is that it makes the whole process data-driven, objective, transparent. If you tie the limits to a recognized inflation measure like the AICPI, the updates become less about subjective decisions or potential holdups. It's meant to be an automatic adjustment that just keeps pace with the real cost of living. No more falling behind for years.
Right, takes the guesswork out, stops things from stagnating again for another 16 years. That makes a lot of sense. The sources also mentioned something about a transparent annual review mechanism. How's that different from the automatic CPI link? Are they separate ideas?
They seem related but distinct. The automatic CPI revision gives you that baseline adjustment for inflation, but this idea of a transparent annual review mechanism sounds like an extra layer. Maybe a dedicated committee or body. Their job would be to look not just at the CPI, but maybe broader economic trends, changes in spending pattern at specific market prices for key goods, things like that.
Ah, okay. So this review body could potentially recommend adjustments beyond just the CPI calculation if they see other major factors impacting costs.
Precisely. It's a more holistic look. It could catch things the CPI alone might miss. And the sources emphasize this review needs to be systematic. Regular timelines for checking and making changes to avoid the kind of gridlock we've seen since 2008.
It sounds like a pretty comprehensive package then. A big initial increase, an automatic yearly top-up based on inflation, and then a regular, broader review. Seems thorough.
It does. And the main goal behind all these suggestions is pretty clear. Protect the financial well-being of the defense community. If you align the CSD limits with economic reality, the system can actually do what it's meant to do, provide affordable essentials, and reduce financial strain for service members and veterans.
So for our listeners who raised this, what should really stick out is just how much things have changed economically since '08. That almost 200% inflation number really tells the story. It shows why this isn't just a small detail.
Absolutely. And remembering that this hits JCOs and ORs, 97% of beneficiaries, the hardest really underlines why it needs addressing urgently. Fixing these limits isn't just about numbers, it's really about fairness. It's about making sure the CSD benefit actually works for the people who rely on it most.
And that idea of using the CPI for future adjustments, it seems designed to make the process data-driven, transparent, less political maybe. Stops it getting stuck again.
Exactly. It offers a much more objective, predictable way to make sure purchasing power doesn't just evaporate over time due to inflation. It helps provide that financial security.
Okay, so let's sum up the key points. The 2008 CSD grocery limits, severely outdated. Why? Massive inflation, rising costs, the impact, a real negative financial hit for a huge part of the defense community, especially JCOs and ORs.
And the proposed fix is a big immediate increase, automatic annual adjustments tied to the AICPI, plus that transparent review. They're all aimed at fixing this gap, making the system fair and effective again.
Ultimately, it really highlights that support systems like the CSD, they have to adapt, don't they? They need to keep up with economic changes to actually deliver the intended benefits. Because when policies stay frozen while the economy moves on, they can end up causing hardship instead of helping.
And that CPI link is valuable because it's tied to the real cost of goods. It's not arbitrary. It's a data-backed way to maintain the intended value of the benefit over time.
So as you, our listener, think more about this CSD limits deep dive, maybe consider the wider picture. How often do financial support systems get stuck in the past like this, where outdated rules end up diminishing the help they're supposed to provide? And how crucial are those regular data-driven updates like linking to CPI to keep these systems fair and effective for the long haul. Definitely something to reflect on.
Indeed. Looking at how things like the CPI directly impact what people can actually buy day to day, it's a useful lens for looking at lots of support structures in society, isn't it?